Friar from Harry Potter. And this is Everything Geek Podcast.
Your attention, masters, mistresses. All systems functional for the Everything Geek Podcast.
Hey, it's James Arnold Taylor, the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi and
Master Poku
in Star Wars The Clone Wars, and you're listening to Everything Geek, the podcast.
Face it, Tiger. You just hit the jackpot with the Everything Geek Podcast.
Hello everyone, you're listening to the Everything Geek Podcast. I'm your host Rory, and joining me is co-host Maureen.
Hello.
And also joining us today is a very special guest. We have special makeup effects creator Robert Kurtzman, who worked as Freddy Krueger's head emoji effects supervisor and special makeup effects artist on The Nightmare on Elm Street 5 The Dream Child, director, producer, writer, cinematographer, visual effects producer, and special makeup effects producer on The Rage, director, visual effects producer, special makeup effects producer, and special effects director on Buried Alive, co-producer, screenwriter, and makeup effects supervisor on From Dusk Till Dawn, special makeup effects unit crew on Evil Dead 2, special effects supervisor on Halloween 5, Revenge of Michael Myers, feature effects crew on Predator, special makeup effects supervisor on Scream, makeup artist on Leatherface, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, and special makeup effects on From Dusk Till Dawn 2, Texas Blood Money, and From Dusk Till Dawn 3, The Hangman's Daughter. So how are you today, Robert?
I'm doing great. How you guys doing?
We are very well, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast. I could have read even more credits out, of course, because you've worked on so much, but there's only so much time we really want to, you know.
It was too long as you had it.
yeah, like, I did go through them pretty quickly, actually, so, yeah. But as I say, it really is a pleasure to have you join us on the podcast today.
No, thanks for having me. You guys, how's the weather over there?
It's okay. It could be worse.
Yeah, it's surprisingly sunny today for like the first time in forever. Like,
yeah,
brilliant.
Yeah, it's a big surprise when that happens. Yeah. So getting right into my questions, Robert. My first question for you is: how did you decide you wanted to become a special makeup effects creator, and can you tell us about how you first became interested in prosthetic makeup?
Well, it started, I started out really young, being just a creative kid. I had a mom who was an artist, so she always inspired our creative side. And I kind of just started watching, this is way before cable or any of that stuff, It was back in the UHF days. I don't even know if you guys know what that is over there, but UHF was like an antenna-driven thing where you got like 3 channels and you had to like dial the box in, perfectly to watch it. And I just was glued to fantasy films and horror movies and King Kong and Wizard of Oz and all those films when I was a little kid, and I was like just amazed by how they did things. And kind of over the years, once they started coming out with magazines and things about, makeup artists creating things, and Ray Harryhausen and things like that, I was just kind of glued to that and started reading up on, how they made these things, and that there was actually a career you could go into, So that was kind of, and I grew up on late night horror host shows. Over here, we were watching like Big Chuck and Little John, or Ghoulardi, or The Ghoul, and locally everybody came up in the business at the same time, had these horror hosts that they grew up on in their area. So they were local horror hosts, most of them, and they worked for like Channel 8, what would be the equivalent of Fox Channel 8, now it would, it was these guys just kind of filling airspace, and they would get these public domain movies and show them late at night, and we'd watch them, and it was like, it was like, Giant Claw. It was all the B movies from the 50s and 60s, or, and they would just play them over and over again. Every weekend there was a new movie, and we'd try to stay up. It was always at 11:30 at night, stay up and try to watch it, and, wait for your dad to get home from work. My dad was always on the late shift, so he'd come home at 12:15 at night, and we were always in the basement or in the living room watching, some sort of giant monster movie, So.
Yeah, that's a very interesting story. Thank you so much for that. So, moving on to my second question, you, along with Greg Nicotero and Howard Berger, became known as the Gore Guys early on into your makeup effects work, and you started up your own company, K&B EFX Group, in 1988. I know that you yourself were a fan of late night horror host shows, you just said, when you were a kid, but did you ever expect when you started working in makeup effects that you would get to work on so many horror productions and become an icon in the eyes of many horror fans?
No, to be honest, growing up watching these movies, it was never an attainable craft, or it was never anything that I thought was. It was like wanting to be an actor, and and saying, yeah, I'd love to be Marlon Brando. It was like that kind of thing. It was never something I thought you could actually do, being from Ohio. I'm in the Midwest. I grew up in the Midwest. I live in the Midwest now. But before I went to Hollywood, I was just this kid, and I had no clue how to make that happen, And I'm the geek kid that's a fan club for Space 1999. You know what I mean? And going to conventions and kind of like going, wow, like these guys are making these shows, and like I had no clue how to break into the business. So, and I just did it. I just left when I was 19, moved to LA, and started doing this. And I happened to get into the business during the heyday era, the big, the 80s, the mid 80s, when things were really kicking in, and managed to come up in the business with a lot of talented artists, and my partners, and also all the other artists I came up in the ranks with, that we're all working at different studios at the time. It was like everybody was, at that time we were all freelancing. We were just a bunch of nomad kids who were juggling around from shop to shop, and weren't making a lot of money, and most of the time there's like 3 or 4 of us staying in a house, all sharing rent. It was kind of like, the Manson family, not that, but you know what I mean? It was like a commune of like makeup artists, or a cult of makeup artists. And, we just, all we wanted to do was work. And we were just amazed that we were actually working on movies and coming from where we came from, because almost every makeup guy came from somewhere else. A lot of people didn't grow up in LA. There's a few people I know, like Howard and stuff, grew up in LA, but a lot of people were transplants. They came from other states, and we grew up, looking at these guys, or watching our idols like Rick Baker, Dick Smith, John Chambers, all these guys that were doing movies like Planet of the Apes and stuff when we were growing up, and we were kind of watching them, just going, how do these this is actually a career. We couldn't believe it, and so that whole era was like, I mean, everybody thinks that era was like, whoa, everybody, you guys must have been making bank and all this stuff. We were a bunch of kids, man, just like, it was almost equivalent to being a rock star where you got paid nothing and gave up all your rights to everything you ever did just because you were working, just to work on something. So
That's very interesting. Thank you so much for that. So, moving on to my third question, can you talk about your work as Freddy Krueger's head emoji effects supervisor on A Night on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child? Considering A Nightmare on Elm Street was among your first makeup jobs, did you find any difficulties in pulling off the emerging effects?
Well, it actually wasn't one of our first makeup jobs. We'd been working. I mean, we'd been doing a lot of stuff prior to that. At that time, though, we were doing a lot of sequels as KMB. We were doing a lot of sequels to the movies we grew up on, like Texas Chainsaw, Nightmare on Elm Street, Nightmare on Elm Street came out when I was in LA. What year did the first one come out? It was 80 something. 80.
Is it 85?
83, 84, 84, 85. Okay. So, but I really loved that movie and thought Wes did something really cool, and of course created a very iconic character. But at that time, we were working on all the different sequels to all the movies we grew up on, like, working with John Carpenter, or any of the directors that we were working on with during the 80s. They were all people we grew up on. So it was like a big, thrill to get to work with Tobe Hooper, John Carpenter, Greg and Howard getting to work with George Romero, and so that was kind of the coolest thing about work. And Sam Raimi had just done Evil Dead, and then we started working with him, and it was just that era of like getting to work with, or Don Coscarelli, for instance, who I did Bubba Hotep, and John Dies at the End just recently. They're all filmmakers that I went to see their movies at the theater prior to actually working with them, and I was like, wow, this is really cool getting to work with these guys. So, did I answer the question? I don't know.
Yeah, I think you answered the first part of it. Actually, I'm not sure if you answered. Did you find any difficulties in pulling off the emerging effects part of it? I'm not sure. Did you answer that?
No, I didn't. You're talking about when Freddy transforms out of the girl?
Yeah.
Stretches out. Yeah, we did these sculptures. Mark Maitre did the what I call the really cool, like, twisty sculpture where the two faces are merged together. And then what we did was, the hard part was, we were still doing stop motion animation at that time. When the girl's leg bursts out, there's all the stop motion puppet versions of her. So it was interacting with the stop motion guys, plus us doing the live action stuff, and then whatever went on makeup wise with Freddy and his close-ups, and it was kind of merging three departments together, at that time. Which, I don't know if you guys know this, but on all the Freddy movies, there's like always 5 effects teams, 5 different shops or something working on it, because it was such a short prep period that they break it into like segments for different effects houses to handle, and then during shooting, there was like 4 or 5 different stages being utilized at the same time. And Robert Englund would have to put the makeup on and then go from one stage to another, to another, to another, while different units were shooting. So it was very unusual. I mean, it's kind of commonplace now doing a movie with multiple units and stuff like that. But at that time, I had never done anything like that, where there was that many units shooting at the same time. So it was a very unusual, shooting process on that. But
yeah, it's very interesting, definitely. And you both actually were a little bit confused for a moment. I did just look up myself. The first The Nightmare on Elm Street was actually released in 1984. So, yeah, you're actually right with that, Robert. Yeah.
Basically, that came out my first year in Hollywood, and I knew Wes's work prior to that because of Hills Have Eyes and Last House on the Left. So I was that guy, in my basement finding bootleg copies or of movies, because there was at that time VHS was just coming out. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah.
I discovered a lot of the movies that I couldn't watch when I was a kid because my parents wouldn't let me or whatever, or I was too young to get in the theater. Like I saw The Exorcist way later, but was still blown away by it. And it's the same thing with some of those movies. A lot of Wes's movies, like Hills Have Eyes, I didn't see in the theater. I wasn't allowed to go, so I had to see it once it came out on VHS. And we were able to buy, get a VHS player and go to a video store.
Yeah, very interesting. So moving on to my fourth question, which is a bit of a long one. When you first started directing films such as The Demolitionist in 1995 and Wishmaster in 1997, CGI was just starting to be used in films, and you've directed other films since, like The Rage and Buried Alive, both of which were released in 2007. And Deadly Impact, released in 2010. But you say you had to use CGI more in your recently directed films, and if you were to redo The Demolitionist and Wishmaster now, do you think you would have to use more CGI in them now, compared to when CGI was first starting to come into films when you originally did those two?
Yes and no. I mean, we obviously when I did Wishmaster and Demolitionist, there's no CGI. It's all done green screen and film composite. Well, no, that's not true. Sorry. We did have silicone graphic compositing machines at that point. So we did do the compositing in silicone graphics. But we did shoot everything as miniatures against green screen and, did a painting for the background. It was so it was not, at that point, not all CG was entertainment. I couldn't even attain it on that budget. You know what I mean? So in that sense. So, but on Wishmaster we had a little more. And would I use more of it now? I do use more of it now, and the only reason is like schedules are so tight now. There's certain things you just make no sense to do. You can't. Having a guy drop off on top of a building and risk his life is not worth doing when you can do it digitally. There's certain things that safety things that come into play. Doing 500 squibs on a guy in a room, you can wire them and shoot that, and take 6 hours to wire every actor and do all this stuff and do all this pyro. Or you can augment it with CGI. And that's unfortunately what it's come down to, but that's what it is. And I don't really think it's bad in the sense that it actually is a safety issue. I mean, like, in The Walking Dead, they blow off tons of guys' heads, but if they were squibbing them all day long, first off, there'll be concussion issues. There's issues that happen with the actors when you're putting those charges off on their heads. And I've had it happen on Wishmaster. So, with Andrew Devoff blowing his head off, I had to replace that whole thing with a CGI effect, which was actually a composite effect of a practical element. But the reason that happened was because on the set they blew the squib off and he got a concussion, and had to go to the hospital, and we lost hours of shooting, and and now looking at it, I would just shoot it and digitally do it. It makes more sense. I'm not saying I'm a big fan of digital, because God knows I'd love to see more practical creatures. I'm tired of seeing giant monsters smashing everything, and golems and whatever, orcs and whatever. It's like, Yeah, okay, I've seen it a million times. It's not impressive to me anymore. Like there's nothing they can't do, so it doesn't make me excited anymore to see it. So the movies that make me excited are these smaller pictures now that have, you know, these guys are creating things and doing things cinematically that make me go, wow, that's minimalist, but it was effective and it was cool and scary and it was a practical effect, and that's really cool. So
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that's a great perspective. I mean, so many smaller picture films really are very good with practical effects, but they don't get the attention they deserve a lot of the time, which is very unfortunate, in my opinion. Yeah,
well, that's the thing. I mean, it's really hard to get a movie out there in a mass audience kind of thing where you release a
exactly.
movie and it costs so much money. But that's what's great about, Netflix and on demand and digital. And now, to me, I'm seeing a lot more movies that I really dig. I mean, I just watched We Are Still Here, and I was like, wow, this is a nice, creepy little movie. It's kind of cool. So.
Yeah, it's great. So, moving on to my fifth question. Now, of all of the films you've had the chance to work on, both makeup and directing, which of the films would you rank as your favorite? And can you tell me what made those films so special compared to all of the others?
Of my own movies, great. Uh, uh, they're all kind of special. They're all, bastard childs, but I don't know. I'm very fond of Wishmaster. I'm also very fond of Deadly Impact because it was a departure. It was an action film for me, and I'm an action fan. So, and then there's something about The Rage that I really like, even though it has its limitations and its imperfections. But the making of that movie was very liberating because I was also shooting it, and it was just a freedom of being able to do whatever we wanted to do, even though we probably bit off too more than we could chew. Um, as far as it was a movie that was just way too packed with effects, in my opinion. But it's a fun movie, and the big thing about the movie is I really just wanted to be full of energy and just be a fun like kind of drive-in movie type of experience, and I think that it works that way. So I kind of love that one too. I don't know, it's hard. So
Yeah. In some ways, it's almost like saying which, of your children is your favorites, I guess. It's
exactly.
just.
Well, they all may have problems. You know what I mean? You live with it. So, but
Yeah, it's a really good answer. Moving on to my next question. Recently, you and Robert England have been offering photo shoots with the fans at conventions with Robert in full Freddy Krueger makeup. I believe you will be doing this for the first time in Europe at London Film and Comic Con soon. At what point do you think it is that fans of The Nightmare on Elm Street get such an experience?
well, look, if I was a kid, I mean, I'm not. I'm old and jaded at this point. But anyway, if I was like a kid, first off, Freddy's like one of the greatest iconic horror. He's right up there with Frankenstein, Family Opera, Hunchback of Notre Dame, all those characters. So, and those are the old ones I grew up on. I'm even So um, to be able to take a picture with him and it's actually him is just like a really cool thing. I just, if I was a kid coming up and wanting to go to a convention, I was all excited about going to see, the guys that I went to see at conventions like that. And, I was a big sci-fi geek, so I was going to see, Martin Landau at a Space 1999 convention, or, William Shatner at a Star Trek convention or whatever. But if I had that opportunity at this point to take a picture, it'd be awesome. And I'm really excited about doing the makeup on Robert. First off, I love working with Robert. I've worked with him for years, and worked with him on 976 Evil, which he directed, and a bunch, other stuff. And I also, got to work with him as a director. So he's really fun guy to be around. I like working with him. I like doing makeups on him because he's a great. He just knows what to do in the when you're working with him, you can say, hey, don't open your eyes for 10 minutes and stop talking, whatever, because I'm gluing the makeup down, and he understands it because he wants it to be cool. He wants it to be perfect, So I just think it's a great opportunity for people to get out there and actually meet him. And Robert's a really great guy. He just loves the fans and loves to, interact. So.
Yeah, that's also such a great experience because it's not even very common. Like, as I said, it's the first time it's in Europe, apparently, that this has been offered for fans. And I think in America itself, it's only been offered on a couple of occasions, maybe.
No, we only did it once.
Right, only once, so very rare indeed. So, yeah, definitely something a lot of horror fans should definitely get. That's for sure. We can both agree on that. Yeah. So, moving on to my next question. For our listeners who aren't familiar with it, can you tell us about your current company, Robert Kurtzman's Creature Corps, and why our listeners should consider giving it a look?
Yeah, well, it's Robert Kurtzman's Creature Corps, like Marine Corps, and it's a corps of people that work here, and we do haunted attractions and haunted attraction effects, as well as all the movie stuff we do. Then I have P13 Entertainment, which is my entertainment company, which is the company I produce my movies through. If you go to check out our website, it's Robert Kurtzman's Creature. Oh, it's actually creaturecore.net, corps.net, creaturecore.net. And we're just a bunch of artists that can't do anything else. This is what we do, and we just that's all we're doing is creating effects. Everything. Right now, we're making fake cows for a movie, mechanical cows. So it's like, I don't know, it's whatever, Artistically, we make animals, bodies, human replicas, creature effects, prosthetics, makeup effects. We do a little of everything. So, and we know how to make movies, so we do that as well. So
that's really great, and we'll be sure to provide the link to the website Robert mentioned in our live chat. So, moving on to my last question, Robert. Do you have any upcoming makeup or directing jobs or any other projects you would like to talk about coming up?
I won't talk about the directing jobs because I'm pitching things, but I feel like if I talk to them about it before they're actually real, that it's like it's a negative. So it's a hindrance. Anyway, but on the makeup effects side of things, we just started a film called Charnel House. We have a movie coming out called Funhouse Massacre, which is actually kind of fun spoof on haunted attractions with lots of gore in it. We just did a movie with Dolph Lundgren called Shark Lake. Trailer's up online, but we did the mechanical sharks in that, which was kind of a bit of an undertaking. Out right now, we have It Follows coming out, which we did. It's hitting DVD this month. And then if you want to check out stuff that's currently out there, we have Tusk. Late Phases, a really cool little werewolf movie. We just finished a movie with Kevin Smith called Yoga Hosers, which is going to be coming out in the next 6 months or so. And we're getting ready to start up another project with Kevin, actually, next few weeks.
That's great. So we'll definitely be sure to keep an eye out for all of those films and projects then. So thank you very much, Robert, for answering all of my questions. I'll let my co-host Maureen ask hers now.
Jumping straight into my questions, my first question is, what are some of the biggest challenges that accompany being a makeup artist, especially within horror?
Well, as an effects company, it doesn't just land under horror. We do everything from, I mean, we've done the Spy Kids movies. We do comedies where we have comedy gags, and a lot of animal effects movies. You know, where we do animal replicas like Dances with Wolves or City Slickers or Wild America, or you might just have a thing in a movie like we did this movie with it was Road Trip, and all we had to do is make fake snakes that that were used in one scene where he's like feeding mice to a snake, and then it jumps on his hand, and there's a big comedy scene with it. So, and there's all these little weird things like in movies that you don't even realize that they're effects movies until later. And I mean, unless you know how to read it and break it down, and you go, okay, Chris Farley is going to be running around with bats flying over his head. You know what I mean? It's like, so then you go, okay, now we got to make fake bats. Now, nowadays, it would probably be CG bats, but back then we had bats on wires, flying around their heads.
It really has changed.
Yeah, it has. And to be honest, I can't blame them for changing it. Everybody's like so against CG, but to be honest, if you do a puppet gag, you got to pay puppeteers. So that's now a SAG issue. So, and now they got residuals. There's things they have to pay that add up to more than having an animator sit in a room and do it. So that's what it is.
Yeah, I mean, it always kind of depends on the film more than anything about whether CGI is warranted or not. Like some films do opt to keep with, the classical kind of puppeteers and less computer generated effects, which can be nice.
No, it's great. And to be honest, I mean, give or take a few of his films, but Guillermo del Toro is that perfect director.
Yeah.
That mixes it. With the exception of, I mean, some people will probably see his new movie, which is the Haunted House movie. There's things that are in there, but they're going to think they're CGI, even though there were practical elements composited using CGI. So there's a difference. There's directors that use practical elements and mix it, and then there's the directors that do all CGI. I don't know if I don't want to rag on it, but I saw the new Poltergeist last week, and I'm a big fan of the original, so it was really hard to watch the new one regardless, because I'm not a new person coming in to watch it, and I was really disappointed because there was a lot of CGI that I was like, really, can we just show a coffin burst out of the ground with a real corpse in it? It's like with a real puppet corpse, and it was frustrating for me because it was all just digital skeleton guys jumping out of the ground.
My second question is, what kind of training, if any, did you get in visual effects and special effects? And did you receive any new training once CGI became more commonplace?
All right. Makeup effects wise, I went to school. I took a course for 12 weeks. Joe Blasco's. I was an artist prior to this. I had learned how to oil paint and design and sketch and all that stuff before going to LA, and then learned. This is also 1984, 83. I learned how to do makeup effects, but real rudiment. It was real basic, school. They taught very little on the makeup effects side, but it got me out to LA, and then I broke into the business by hitting the pavement, going to studios and applying for jobs, and finally getting a job at John Beekler's, which was I started out working on all the movies like Troll and stuff at the Empire Pictures studio, And so that was great because it was like coming up in the Roger Corman era. You know, Charlie Band was kind of like Roger Corman, where, you know, he was doing a lot of low budget movies, like 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 a year, and we got to work on them. And that was my learning experience, you know, coming up in the business. And I came up in the business with a lot of other artists that went on to work with Rick Baker and, you know, Howard and Greg and everybody else, and Gino Crognoli was on The Walking Dead, and I mean, Mitch Devane, who used to sculpt for Rick Baker all the time. It's just crazy stuff. As far as that, I learned how to do visual effects completely different. I learned visual effects as a director, having to deal with visual effects. So then I became someone who knew how to put together the elements of visual effects. So now I could visual effects supervise. So I could see how to break down a visual effects shot by going, okay, we got a background plate, we got a foreground element, we got a midground element, and this is how we're going to shoot it and composite it together. So that's how I became a visual effects. I don't do visual effects. I'm not a computer guy who sits and does animation. I'm a visual effects supervisor, knowing in that sense, I know as a director how to put a visual effects shot together and make it work. And that's pretty much how I learned.
That's really interesting. Even myself, I'm kind of leaning towards that kind of side of, in my own degree, kind of thinking visual effects supervision. That's really interesting. So my third question for you is, because you've worked across so many different areas of film, cinematography, makeup effects, producing, writing, which is the area you find most interesting to work in?
Well, I'll be directing with makeup effects being second, but I pretty much, I'm an effects guy primarily because I direct so few films compared to what I'd like to direct. And that's the process of being, you know, an independent filmmaker. It's like, it takes forever to get your next project going. So I have a lot of stuff I want to do as a director, but, you know, in the meantime, I like to be creative. So I'm a makeup effects guy. I like, and doing makeup effects allows me to be on set, allows me to have input, allows me to, you know, be creative. And so that I'm happy doing that. And then when I direct, I direct. But, you know, primarily if I could direct all the time, I'd be directing all the time. But it's not way, independent filmmaking, that's not the way it is. It's really, you know, you have to go out and hustle, and you're lucky, you know, you're basically pushing a movie every 4 or 5 years. So
yeah, it's understandably quite a difficult kind of industry to work your way.
Look at like filmmakers like Don Coscarelli, or, you know, true independent filmmakers. You know, Don's last film was John Dies at the End. It's been several years since. Literally, his next film, he has to raise the money for. He has to put the script together. He has to go out and do that, and it's very frustrating. But that's the deal. And you know what? It's a love. This entire industry is a love-hate relationship, and I'd rather be doing this than anything else because I can be creative.
Yeah, it's totally understandable. I mean, it's the same reason I'm going into film myself, is that I can't be involved in something that is in no way creative. I get where you're coming from on that. So that's all of my questions. Thanks so much for answering all of them.
Thanks for asking. All right.
So that's all of our questions for you today, Robert. It's been a pleasure having you on the podcast.
Well, thanks for having me.
You're very welcome, and hopefully we can talk to you again at some point.
Oh, yeah, anytime. Let me know.
Great. So I'll talk to you again soon then. Bye, and thanks again for joining us.
You guys have a great night.
You too. Bye. That was a good interview, wouldn't you agree?
Oh, definitely. I mean, when I saw everything this guy had done, I was like, I have to talk to him because it's exactly the same area of films I'm looking at myself now. So it's like, oh, what's it like to really be a visual effects supervisor? And really interesting.
Make sure to check out our YouTube channels. The podcast is www.youtube.com/user/everythinggeekcast. Mine is www.youtube.com/user/everythinggeekcast. Cephalus Destroyers. Mine's is www.youtube.com/user/Lizzie11. Check out our Facebook page,